Hello, everybody, and welcome to our very first podcast. This is Rewind and Reflect, where we believe in the universal truth that there is no such thing as coincidence or mistakes. And we are here to share our experience on that with you. I'm Deb Miller.
Susan Doyle. Nice to meet you guys. And Deb's great to see you. Super excited to be here. I am so excited to tell people our story and how we became friends and how we lost our way. And ultimately, the universe brought us back together, even though I am in Massachusetts and you're in Florida.
You're freezing a little
Universe,
fishy off in Massachusetts, and
yes.
I'm in short sleeves in Florida.
Yes, and I'd rather be there. So, but we'll talk about that at some other point. I am just happy that the universe works the way it does, and we have found each other again.
Yeah.
And let's get started. Let's talk about how we came to be, Deb and Sue.
Yes. So, it's funny because way back when in seventh grade, when we met each other, and I asked you while you sat next to me in science lab if you would be my best friend, my BFF, my BFA, best friends always. And you said, sure, why not? And we were just absolutely connected at the hip ever since until probably midway through senior year in high school when things, you start to kind of get ready for college and you start to do all the things that you need to do. And my parents happened to move away midway through senior year. So I moved in with a friend to finish out the senior year in high school. And then I never really went back to that town. So you and I kind of went our separate ways and lost touch for a while. But if I think back to now, in seventh grade, we weren't talking about the universal law. We weren't talking about our spiritual journeys. It was very much which boys we liked and, our clothes that we're going to buy and whatever it may be. But like with everything in life, that I firmly believe this, but it took me a while to get to this place in my journey that people come into your life when they're meant to be, they leave when they're meant to, and then they come back right at the right time, if that's meant to be. And so we reconnected, what, 30 years after high school,
I think it was 30 years later.
30 years
Yes.
later. And
Even maybe, yeah, about 30 years.
yeah, so we have 30 years worth of experiences and stories to tell, and the journey that we have been on, which has been so different yet so the same. It's been different from the outside, looking on the outside, but inside, behind those closed doors, what we went through individually inside of ourselves was so much the same. It just
So
came
much the
out
same.
looking very different.
Yes.
And so when we reconnected and we were able to share with each other what our lives had been through, what we had been through, what our lives turned into, it was like, wow, yours looks very different than mine. Yet inside, we both had the very same struggles. And I just think that, to tell our stories and to talk about how much our spiritual growth has just helped us through the years. And now that we've reconnected, um, how amazing it is that we could just jump back into a friendship, but a really, really pure friendship that is just based on all the right things.
You said it perfectly. I couldn't have said it better myself. I believe that, yes, I agree with you that our stories from the outside looked so very different. Um, the way that we got there, I believe, was the same. And I believe that now it's so funny when they say that you know your true friends where you can not talk for months and pick up the phone like nothing, no time had ever passed.
Mhm.
Well, our months turned into decades, and
Yeah,
it's still that connection, the ease in which we relate to one another is a testament to the universe bringing us together in the first place and how we're both on this journey, and I think a lot of people out there who ultimately will start listening and following this, whether they're on their own or don't know where to begin or know that they're maybe stuck in a place in their process, that they're not alone, and
right.
that our connection and their connections ultimately were brought to them through their universal powers, their universal connections. And um, I think we all share so much, although it looks different. I
Yeah,
think we share so much of the same. And I want to say too, I think it's a lot of it is the same, for girls or women who grew up, let's tell our audience, I will be 57. We were both born in 1968. I will be 57 in a month, and Deb just turned 56. So, we were born in the late 60s and lived the majority of our teenage years, so to speak, in the 80s.
the best ever.
Best
Best
ever,
music
greatest
ever.
music of all time. But, things weren't talked about. Things weren't, so I think, I want everybody to know that we are also going to dive super deep into the supposed tos rather than the wanted to. We did things we were supposed to do, and all these things, and we did the should haves, and we followed direction from our parents and their parents, and the world was changing so much. Um, that I think it ultimately led to that internal struggle, that what I like to call my story, the story that I would tell myself as in which is the story that ultimately got me in trouble.
Hmm. Yeah. And those voices in our head they same with me, drove me to a place that I would have never expected myself to be in, or it's quite shocking. I do want to say also that we're not going to we're not going to edit this at all. So we're just going to be who we are. And if we trip on,
Listen, we have not edited ourselves ever.
I know, I know.
We're not starting now.
No, we're not. So, sometimes the beginnings of the music might go haywire, or we might trip on our words or whatever, but we're just here to have a conversation. And let's face it, in real life, that's what happens. We have conversations. And I will be the first to say that, and I've told Sue this before, that I'll often break into a game of charades because I have forgotten what word I'm trying to use. So it'll be like, sounds like, and it was that thing. And, so just bear with me through that. But hey, it comes with age. You forget things,
Does
the most
comes
basic
with
thing.
age.
Crazy.
Yes.
It's just insane. So yeah, I want to dive all the way into that. I also want to let our audience know that, we will be talking about some things that are very personal, very real. Life is not a bed of roses, but we've learned to handle things in a way that have helped us keep our sanity. I am certain that there'll be a lot of people that can relate to who we were, what happened to us, and who we are now, and
Agreed.
hopefully, kind of help people to move along if they're stuck, because that is really not a fun place to be.
Yeah, or just like we discussed earlier today, know that life is meant to be lived with it takes a village mentality.
Right.
And if somebody can just feel a sense of belonging in our little village, then,
Yes, then welcome. And
welcome.
and I wanted to touch base too on something else that you had just said about, so we had been apart for about 30 years. And when I said at the beginning that, there is no such thing as coincidences, you came back into my life right when it was meant to be. And we have spoken about this before because of where I was during those 30 years, or at the
Mhm.
beginning, midway through those 30 years. You would not have been able to be a friend to me during that time. It just wasn't, it just was not the right time for us to reconnect. Um,
Agreed.
you had to do some growing. I had to do some growing. We both had to get through some stuff that brought us to a place where we were able to be really just friends and not no judgment, no nothing, and just be sympathetic to what we had gone through in the past. So,
Yeah,
um,
I
any,
agree. When we reconnected, I definitely realized and felt that um, I was not comfortable with myself enough and I know for a fact, looking back and hearing your story, that I would not have been able to be in your life with grace and non-judgment.
Mhm. And that's why you
Um,
weren't that's why we were not connected during all
yeah,
those years.
yeah. So I am actually going to tee it up for you. So I want to give the audience just a little bit of background. Debbie and I, like I said, we were born in the late 60s, grew up in the 70s and 80s in what most people would consider a middle to upper class white collar community. It was this beautiful, idyllic
Mm-hmm.
town. When we grew up there, there was probably 7 or 8 thousand people that lived there. Now it's probably closer to 20.
Yeah.
Just to sort of give a little perspective, there was two elementary schools in the town, one middle school, one high school. Our graduating class was not even 200 people. Um, everybody, when you say everybody knew everybody. We at 10 or 11 years old could get on our bicycles and ride and ride and ride and without any fear of anything. Um, so we started, our friendship in seventh grade, like Debbie said, and then we lost touch. And so today, Debbie is, when we spoke about me not being able to have the grace to have been her friend during her time apart from me, she is going to share that time with us.
Mm-hmm.
Take it away, my friend.
Well, first of all, I just have to comment on that you're calling me Debbie, which is hilarious because no, 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 it's fine. Like Debbie, Deborah, but
I've always called you Debbie.
right.
And when
So
anybody says, "Who's Debbie?" I'm like, Deb. And they're like, "Well, why are you calling her Debbie?" I'm like, I called her Debbie in seventh grade. I can't, you're not Deb to me, just like I'm not Susan, I'm Sue.
you're Sue to me, right? And
Hmm.
I look back at high school memorabilia and middle, and I signed my name Debbie Lawless because that's my
With
maiden.
a heart over the I.
Always. And now I put a heart at the end of it when I sign my name. So, so at some point I must have gone by Debbie and I just don't remember it. I don't know why I
Debbie. And I
from
used to call you Debadoo a lot too.
Debbie. Yeah.
Debadoo.
Yeah. 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 You did. And Susie Q. Debbie Do, Susie.
CZQ. Mm.
So, um, yeah. So before we get into this, I thought it would be kind of cool for you the little that you knew about me during those years, what did you envision that my life was like? Did you have any, because I know I envisioned what your life was like, knowing that you had what you had at the time.
To be honest, the only thing I knew,
Mm-hmm.
and I ran into your brothers every now and then, but very rarely, um, is I knew you were married. I knew you married somebody from where you spent your summers.
Mm-hmm.
I knew at some point you were living in the Philadelphia area.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know your last name, so really had no idea when or if you moved back to Avon, which is so shocking to me because I did not leave. Well, I left for a little bit and then, came back and we never ran into each other. Even the mutual friend that I spent my entire childhood with, who you ultimately became friends with when your sons were friends, Jen,
Mm-hmm.
never even ran into her.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
she was living smack dab in the middle of Avon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I knew, I don't even know, I might have heard that you had a child, but that was it. I mean, I think my vision for you that I had of you was that you were um very well off, um and a stay-at-home mom.
Mm.
Um and that was about it. And we also have to kind of the listener or our audience has to understand that social media came into play when our
Right.
kids were late teens. So
Yeah.
we didn't have social media.
Right.
I don't even remember honestly running into you. I think I went to one reunion, high school reunion, maybe 10 year.
Yeah.
I didn't go to 5 year because I was pregnant.
Yeah.
Nope. I didn't go to 10 year because I was pregnant. So I think I
Okay.
went to 15.
And yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Um, so that was really all I,
It's just funny how you've just figured I was, well off and,
yes.
yeah,
I
I know.
just I just kind of assumed it, I
Yeah,
think.
isn't that funny? Isn't
Yeah.
that funny? So, I did get married to a man who I had known growing up in Black Point, which is the beach community that we both lived in. And we moved to Philly, the Philly area, right after well, we were actually engaged. We moved there, we got engaged, and I got married when I was 25, and we were still living in that Philly area. And life was really good. It was really good. We were young. He had an amazing job that he was doing really well. It was a very promising future for us. And then I got pregnant and had a miscarriage. And before that, let me take a little step back, and I'm not going to tell my entire story because I don't want to give too much away. Because if anybody wants to buy my book, I literally wrote a book about my life. So if you want to know about it, you can purchase it. But um, while we were living in Philly and things, we were drinking wine, drinking beer, whatever, just normal, nothing out of control. But we were using narcotics. We were using painkillers recreationally, and I became very addicted to them. So we were newly married. I was holding a job, he was holding a job, but I was using painkillers through a lot of that time. And then I finally got off of them, had a excruciating withdrawal from them, but I did get off of them. And that at that point we started planning our family, and I got pregnant, but I had a miscarriage, and we ended up having to go through infertility treatments. And where we went through them, that's a whole other like topic of discussion, women who have to go through infertility treatment because holy shit, that was like heartbreaking to the maximum degree to be in that world. But I was one of the fortunate ones, and I did end up having a baby. And that was in 1999. We were moved back to Connecticut at that point. And soon after, we were divorced. Life became very messy very quickly for a variety of different reasons. I ended up starting to abuse the painkillers again and drinking a lot, and ended up ended up in rehab. It was either rehab or jail, and ended up in rehab looking at 6 felonies, that I had 6 felonies on me. So I was going to go to jail for a very long time. And got into rehab, was successful at rehab. And 20 years later, I am living a life in recovery from, yeah, drugs and alcohol. So married, was a mess, drugs included, addiction, infertility, adultery, a whole bunch of different things, abuse, neglect, and then divorce. And then I hit my bottom soon after that, went into rehab and lived my life in recovery, have lived my life in recovery since. So I literally have been, I divorced my ex-husband when my son was probably 2.5. I had moved out prior to that, but the divorce went through when he was about 2 or 2.5. And by that time, I was like really in the throes of my addiction. And um, so for all of my son's life, from the time he was 2.5 on, I raised him on my own. My ex-husband, his addiction took hold of him, so he wasn't really useful in any way, shape, or form. And I just worked paycheck to paycheck and really took my recovery seriously, went to meetings, did all the things, worked the steps, got a sponsor. So it's just kind of funny because it was the exact opposite, really, of what you pictured it to be.
Yeah,
And a lot of people, I think, pictured that because, um, you know, again, after my book was released and I told my whole story, like no holds barred, and a lot of people have come forward being like, I had no idea, I would never have thought, but here's the thing, it can happen to anybody. So fast
agreed.
forward, yeah, and even during that time of my life in sobriety, we had some significant challenges. My son got sick with cancer. He ultimately lost his leg to the cancer, and all of that I went through clean and sober. And by the grace of God, did not turn to using anything, but it was because of my faith and my belief in my higher power. And part of that higher power, it's God, but it's also the universe, and it's also my spirit guides, all of that is my team of love, that really got me through that. And that's one of the things I'd love to talk about too during the podcast, because I've learned so much about that and about all of the support that we have if we just let it happen. If we allow it to happen, if we open those doors, then we are opening them to so much love and light and help and support and all of that. So, but I struggled and for years and years, with being a single mom, working full time, paycheck to paycheck, so much debt, so much, financial distress. It was never ever easy. So,
Mhm.
when you and I reconnected in Wally Mart that one time,
Of all places,
I
because
know, In Avon. Oh, and that's the other thing. Like, so I never lived in Avon with my husband. I moved to, when I got divorced, I moved to Canton, first to Collinsville. I lived in Collinsville
Okay.
for years. And then I moved back to Avon, and which is the town obviously that we grew up in, and you were still
Hmm.
living there, running a
Yes.
business. But
Yes.
so we didn't run into each other, one, because I was so exhausted after work and my life revolved around my son. And two, the only thing I really did socially was go to AA meetings, because I
Right.
just, or, when Hunter was in the hospital, I was in the hospital. So it didn't really surprise me. We did run into each other that one time in Stop and Shop where I was
Which
blind.
I don't
You
remember.
don't remember that?
So
No,
strange. I
we
don't
were
remember it.
in the baking section and I just was staring at the things on the aisle and like all of the spices and I'm like, and I just said to you, I have no business being here. Like I don't even know why I'm here. I'm trying to follow a recipe. I'm sure it was, and you just kind of laughed and I heard that laugh that I love so much and I'm like, oh my gosh. But it wasn't meant to be. We did not keep in touch
Yeah.
after that.
Yeah.
It was not meant to be. So that is
Um,
the real quick version of what I did in those 30 years. I mean, after high school, I did go to college and did all that, but real life-changing circumstances were, my divorce and my addiction and all the things that happened with that.
so you and I have talked a lot about us growing up and being told, you go to school, you get a good job, get married. And so I think for me, I just assumed that you did all those things and it worked out. Like we've had these conversations, it worked out the way it was supposed to work out in the sense that you followed the blueprint
Yeah.
and you were supposed to be here. So I had this assumption too, based on your parents and your brothers, that you were there too. And I was in my head, the only one who was following this blueprint and for feeling like shoved in this box, like, okay, why is this not working? I'm following all the instructions and this is not working. I'm still not feeling happy or satisfied or anything like that. And I, in my own struggles and my own story, I falsely told myself that all these other people that I grew up with who were following that same blueprint were doing
Mhm.
it better or doing it well or were having success at it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting because I always wanted to be in that box. I welcomed the, the going to college, meeting your husband in or out of college, whatever, getting married, having children. I wanted that. I wanted to be in that box that felt safe to me. What shook my world was addiction.
Mm.
That so here's my husband who was brought up in a very, his parents are still married to this day, so are mine. He's got siblings. Like we were brought up in the same place, in Connecticut. And we had a lot of the same beliefs and values, and we wanted the same things in life. We were, goal oriented. We wanted this, that, the family, all of it. And one little pill
By the
ruined
way, name of her
all of
book.
it. A plug.
Well,
It ruined all
so
of it.
I think I'm going to ask the universal question that I think a lot of people are probably thinking was what was going on that made you or told you it would be okay or you thought it was okay to take recreational drugs other than your typical smoking a little weed and drinking. So what was going on in your head that you said, "Oh, this is fine. Sure, I'll take it." Because we've also had this discussion that I drank my fair share. Trust me when I tell you. But never, ever, I was deathly afraid to take drugs. I think you and I smoked a little pot when we were in like eighth grade or ninth grade or
Yeah.
whatever, but it never went any further for me. And so you're happily married and you and your husband, or you're married, you and your husband are going out, having fun. What what in your head said taking these is going to add to our fun?
So let me take you back to the first time I ever even tried an opioid, and that was because I was madly hungover one day. We had been drinking all night long, big party. The next day, I felt like hell. And a friend of ours at the time said, "Hey, are you allergic to any kind of medication?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "Just take this. This will make you feel better." And it was like it just washed over me. It just took away all of the hangover. And in addition to that, it was like a stimulant for me because I've always been very kind of low energy. And to take one of those pills, I was like, ooh, I felt like I
Yeah.
could take on the world, and oh my gosh, let's do this, let's do that, let's do la la la. And so I loved the feeling of it. So we were taking that just kind of recreationally, again, like, after a night of drinking or whatever.
Mhm.
But it started to get out of control for me when anytime things were going, emotionally, they were difficult for me. I never really learned proper coping mechanisms for things that had gone badly. And my brother at the time, at this particular time, was diagnosed with cancer. We were living in the Philadelphia area. He was living in Connecticut. And I had no, like, I had no way I couldn't deal with the fact that I wasn't close enough to be with my family and to help him. And I didn't know anything about the cancer. I knew he was going to lose his hair and go through chemo and all of that stuff, but it was like, what? This is not, why is this
Yeah.
happening? And so I started taking those pills to make me feel normal, like I can get through the day. And, and then because I'm an addict, the chemistry in my brain just changed. It was that switch, and all of a sudden,
Hmm.
you take one and you got to take another, and you got to take another. And then that's how quickly it happened. I turned to the pills because I was in emotional pain that I did not know how to deal with. And I didn't have any control over it either. So I didn't have any control over what was happening externally to my brother, to my family. Um, and that just was very painful emotionally. So I just started numbing myself. And that's how it happened. A lot of people get addicted because they have an injury or I know I was hungover and I took a pill to make me feel better. And that was how my addiction started. That was it.
Looking back on it, do you think prior to your drug use you were an alcoholic?
No, I don't think so because alcohol was such a depressant for me that I never really like I'd look forward to drinking if we were going to be out partying and but I never craved it and I never was like, "Oh, I need this." It just was too much of a depressant. I really looked for the stimulus. But I will tell you this, talking about the voices in my head before and during my addiction were always very negative. I'm not smart enough, I'm not pretty enough, I can't cook, I don't know how to decorate nicely. Martha Stewart was like a bomb then, way back then. That's when she first came out, so everybody
Mm-hmm.
Martha Stewart-ing it, and I never felt like I had any real talents. So all I felt that I would be good enough doing is being a wife and a mother. And so the voices in my head kept telling me over and over again, this is all you can do. Like a career? Are you kidding me? I barely made it through college. What in the world would I be good at? I never set myself up for success. It was always, I'm going to take what I can get because this is all I'm worth. Those voices went on forever and ever and
Yeah.
ever. And it wasn't until, actually, it wasn't, they still pop up. They still,
Oh, 100%. As you're saying that to me, I am thinking we were the same person. Our our unhealthy behavior to quell that story and those and it got loud. It got really loud at times. Um, the way that we quelled the voices was very different, but the same. I had the same exact conversation. I had a career.
Mhm,
Every time I was at work, I felt like I was failing my kids. Every time I was with my kids, I felt like I was failing my career. I did okay in college and high school just because I was not given a choice not to.
mhm,
Um, and it was people only like me because I can render a service to them. I was in the fitness industry and the only way I'm going to leave my mark is if look like this and yeah, and you want to talk about decades of imposter syndrome. It was
mhm.
the same thing. I would always downplay it. I would always, I was in those voices of I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know how to cook. I mean, t today my kids laugh and joke that my idea of putting vegetables on the table was opening up a bag of carrots and throwing it on there with ranch dressing. Here you go. So I kind of knew, but I didn't cook well. Um, I
Yeah,
didn't, I always kept a clean house, but I mean, I didn't decorate well. I just, it was the same. It was the same. It was the same. It was the same.
yeah. And I just, it's taken me so long to just accept myself for who I am. I
Mhm.
just it's the comparison and I wanted to be funny and just have a good personality, and I just never felt that I was enough. I
Yep.
was
Same.
less than constantly. And then and again, like I read incessantly. I love reading books. Yeah, I put a book down and I can't even really tell you what it was about. Like even though I loved it and I'd highlight things.
Hmm.
So having like conversations with people about important, things that were going on in the world, or oh, I just read this amazing book and this is what da 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 da. Like that just never happened. My memory has been shit for my whole life. So I just never felt like I really could be anything.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, but
I agree.
yeah. So I ended up, taking the jobs that would pay the bills, but that was it. And it wasn't, I tell you, it wasn't really until the last 2 years that I have become really comfortable with who I am and okay with who I am, what my character defects are, and I try to work on them constantly. I'm okay with just being me and I had to get out of that whole loop of what the world expects me to be.
Correct.
you know?
That's the big thing, I think. And I think a lot of people out there can, can really resonate with that is we were told a story from our parents because they knew no different,
Right. They didn't know differently. Right.
but when you talk about this boxes, our moms and dads were put in these boxes in these roles, and they never thought that there was anything more, and they were good with that. And then things started to shift, and now we're being told, yeah, you want to do this story, but you can also like do these things. But nobody ever told us that it was either at the expense of something else,
Mhm.
right? Or you're going to feel really confused and you're going to feel like you're not doing anything right.
Yeah, but here's the other thing. Our parents, both of our moms are stay-at-home moms.
Hmm.
When we were raising our children, it was impossible to have, well, unless you had a killer job but so many people don't have, they need the two incomes to survive. So you're
Yeah.
forced to either work full time and have a family or have a family and cut coupons and be stressed out about money all the time.
Right. Right.
Or, I mean, there was just not an easy way. And women ended up getting really, it landed on them,
Hmm.
be the nurturing mother that takes care of everybody and everything. Oh, and then work a full-time job.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
I mean, I could not do that. I went to work when Hunter was in first grade. And prior to that, I was so fucked up on drugs that I mean, I did have a job, but it was like an outside sales job. So I barely even worked. The only time I really would work is when I'd call on doctors and steal their prescription pads. And the other times it was Hunter and I in pharmacies, driving around Connecticut in pharmacies trying to get fake prescriptions filled.
Uh,
So I did not, I mean, you can say I had a job, but it wasn't like someplace I had to be in at 9 o'clock until 5.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, but again, all of this, all these years later, we look back and we can see how all of these experiences set us up for the person that we are today. I finally know my
Correct.
purpose, and I know, and I'm working towards it, and I'm in alignment with God's will for me and the universe's
Agreed.
will for me. And I wasn't for a very long time, but I needed to be where I was to learn all of these lessons, the universal truth.
And where I was in that time,
Mhm.
um, I didn't like myself enough or think enough of myself to be able to be a good friend to you without judging you.
Yeah. Of
And I
course,
know
because
that I have apologized to you for that. And it was more, I just couldn't get out of my own way, even though on the outside, and we'll get to this in the next time we talk,
yeah,
um, I will share my story. Um, I just couldn't figure out how to like myself enough to be able to be a good friend to anybody.
yeah. And that's very brave of you to say and to recognize because so many people feel that same way, but they might get defensive and say it's not because of what's going on inside of me, it's because of what they're doing or that's happening or it's blame, 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 blame. And but when you get to a point where you're looking real deeply at yourself and you can identify what it is that what the problem is, you can finally fix it.
Right.
But think about it. So if you and I, let's see, when we were 30, let's just say I got sober when I was 34. So 30 years old, let's just say 30, 31. Did you know any drug addicts when you were 30 or 31? Yeah.
No, I mean, I didn't even, no drug addicts, none.
Right, of
I
course not.
mean, the only, I didn't really even know, I really think that was very early, if not prior to any discussion of opioids or a crisis in this country.
Hmm.
Um, no, I mean, we were brought up that drug addicts looked a certain way, toothless, dirty. We there was
Dangerous.
no dangerous. They'd steal. Homeless.
Yeah.
That
I
that would
didn't I didn't know any either, but I knew I was one.
correct.
So imagine that. Like imagine all of a sudden you know that you have a problem and you need help, but all you're thinking in your head is, I'm not like that.
Right.
But here's the thing. There's so many addicts and alcoholics that are educated and professionals and grew up in a nice town and we're all the same, you know?
Yeah, and I know that now,
Right. But my point is, and I
and you know
regress,
that now.
right. But when we were 30, there was nobody. I lost all of my friends because nobody could understand addiction or
Right.
addicts or alcoholism. Nobody could understand that. So, you know, and I don't blame anybody for the way that they reacted to me, or I mean, I would have not known what to do either. So I would have walked away, that's just what you do. Um, but we have so much to talk about with regards to how my addiction manifested and turned into, and then what manifested in you because of those voices in the head. And they're two very different approaches to quieting that voice,
Yeah,
but equally as dangerous.
dangerous and equally as powerful, and I think equally as I think it will resonate with a lot of people. Um, and I believe that, so you believe in a higher power, I do too. You and I just, as we are concluding, tell the listener that I grew up in a Jewish home. Debbie grew up in a home. Deb grew up in a home that Christmas and Easter, but didn't really practice any type of religion. And when I say I grew up in a Jewish home, that meant that we weren't allowed to have a Christmas tree, but it wasn't like we were going to temple every week either. Um, and so, but it's again, not a coincidence that we each came back to one another knowing that there was a higher power in the universe at work on our behalf.
Yes.
And so you came to that through recovery, the 12 steps. And I came, and this also speaks to the dichotomy between the two of us. I came to that realization through my yoga practice. And I'm going to leave it at that. And so next time when we get together, I will share a little bit of my story, my whole story actually, and how it parallels and how the messages that I was sending myself were the exact same messages as you were, but on the outside, I was wrapped and bowed nice and neat and cute and um,
Hmm.
pretty much fooled everybody.
Yeah. Yes, you did. So,
So um, we are, I can speak for both of us, so thrilled to be doing this. It is my honor to share everything and exchange ideas and have conversations that need to be had and hope that anybody out there listening um, takes something away from it. We also have an email address, um, re rewind and reflect with us at gmail.com, all spelled out. anybody at any point wants to write in and share their story, ask a question, we'd be more than happy to discuss anything you guys want to hear.
Hmm. And we'll be having guests on the show and all sorts of different fun stuff. And we would love to hear from our listeners on what you would like to hear about
Yeah.
too. But for now, it's going to be just kind of reflecting on our different lives and how we got to where we are and a bunch of different fun topics,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Well, until next time, namaste, my girl. Be well. I love you.
You, love you all. Talk soon.
Namaste.